Hi, welcome back to the Vulgar Skill. I'm Ryan Neal. Today we're going to be discussing the next rule of Godinho's two swords, which is when we're attacked on one side and the other with the opponents in front of us, as opposed to attacked on one side and the other with the opponents behind, in front, things like that. We're addressing opponents attacking us to either side, but they're still within sort of this front arc of us, to use sort of a gaming term. So, we're going to begin with the position that we take most often with the two swords. The sword nails down over the head, the other one withdrawn below the arm. And he doesn't specify which foot is forward here initially. You could start with the left foot forward with the footwork coming up. But I start right foot forward usually in this position because I like my high arm to be the same side that the leg is forward. That's for various reasons. One, that it improves my reach with that arm, especially when this arm comes out. And it gives me like more ability to use my hips than if I have to turn over this extended leg. But you'll see the footwork really lets you start with either. So find your preference, but I'm going to, for the purposes of this video, start with the right foot forward. So our first action is we're going to step not forward, because really that winds up flanking ourselves if the opponents are kind of spread out in front of us. Instead, we're going to address this threat while dealing kind of much like single sword multiple opponents, presenting enough of a threat to keep this side at bay. And what I mean by that is I'm going to take a step out to the right side and I'm going to throw a revés and a tajo, and I want the arcs wide on these. It doesn't have to be necessarily horizontal, though it can be if you're really trying to sweep and address this threat while presenting a credible enough threat to this side to keep that side at bay. It can be relatively vertical, but the cut specified are you step, a revés, and a tajo, and then you're gonna put that foot in front, walking essentially. Then, because the swords are now switched, you're gonna put the left foot towards these opponents, cutting a revés, tajo, pull. You can either take a full step, or you can. I kind of like to do a slide. It depends on what kind of terrain you're on. The reason I like a slide is because if the terrain is uneven, I can kind of feel that and stop myself. Whereas if I step and I step on a stray stone or things when I'm not in a nice fencing hall, it can cause some issues. So be flexible. Vary your step depending on the terrain. But your goal is to you kind of walk forward while your attacks go off to these diagonals, keeping the arc wide on those diagonals so that you don't just address over here and then get murdered by these guys behind you. So instead, you step out, and this covers any cuts that are being delivered, and this is ready to address the threat. As specified earlier rules, these cuts could be knocking swords aside. The cuts could be actually cutting someone. It could just be making motion to protect yourself. The goal is to keep it moving so that you're never forced to engage one-on-one with an opponent, because the moment you decide to engage in fence with one, hyper-focus, and you get tunnel vision, which is easy to do under stress, especially under life and death sword fights as opposed to pretend sword fights. It's very easy to tunnel vision, your adrenaline spikes, and you lose track of these guys. So you want to kind of keep your head on a swivel, keeping kind of everything like this loose focus on everyone around you, and you're going to take the steps. So again, right foot to this angle, revés tajo, left foot to this angle, revés tajo, and then you're going to repeat. And again, you could also cut those wide if you so choose, if there's enough. Because even if you're not aiming at these guys, if you cut a big swath, that whipping by your face tends to make you get second thoughts. Especially if you're not particularly disciplined or elite of any kind and you aren't really wanting to be the first to risk your life to take the two-sword madman out. He says you could also, when you do this tajo, you could set it up with a punching thrust, because it makes the cut sort of move easier, and it also gives you 2 blows for the price of 1. It's 2 blows in one time, which is always nice because you can hit someone twice and take the same time it would to hit them one time. That's always convenient. So, as I'm coming around to give this attack over this side, instead of revasing first, which kind of uncrosses the arms a little bit, you can deliver that Tahoe with a punching thrust, boom, which you remember from prior videos is very much a powered jabbing thrust. Usually, it's the kind of thrust that if you do any other fencing system like rapier or small sword, you tell your students to stop doing and never do because it's hard to hit accurately with. It's injurious to your training partners. Later rapier masters call it a defect, and it tends to be less optimal in a lot of ways than the standard extend and thrust and using the legs to propel through. But Godinho likes this because it does propel into cuts really, really well. So you're going to come over here with your step, and you're going to give that punching thrust. And that punching thrust, notice that carries you through so that this reverse, as it's clearing a sword or cutting at somebody, this thing has now got a lot of more momentum behind that. You started with the punching thrust, and you cut through. And then you pull the leg back with that. So you can thrust, cut, thrust, cut, cut. Almost like a waltz. Thrust, cut, cut, thrust, cut, cut. Walking, giving the punching thrust in the 2 cuts. Godinho also advises this rule for fighting against multiple people with rodelas, round shields. The difference is, like most of his fencing for fencing against somebody with a shield, is that you keep the cuts low so that people can't like catch your cut on their shield and now they can go under your sword and stab you to death. Instead, what you're going to do is your cuts, I'll do it without the punching thrust just to show, because he also says don't thrust against shield bend because it's easier for them to defend. You're just going to step off to this right angle here and cut about ankle height. Same footwork. And I don't know if you could hear like the speed I'm getting, but you can get a lot of velocity to take someone out at the ankles. Other big pro tip to do these cuts well is, like I said in prior videos, it's easy with 2 swords to throw your first cut really well, whip it through, but now you have no hips left, and this kind of is just an all-arm cut, which again may injure somebody, may kill somebody, but is suboptimal. So really focus on where your hips are at when you take these steps so that you're cutting, you start your cut, and then around about the middle, depending on how much time your sword is taking to get around, your hips engage with that second cut as well, so that you're always powering every cut with your body. So practice that, uniting hip to cut, or hip to each cut, and then you can figure out different kinds of ways you want to time the punching thrust, where if you want to slam your hips in, you can always kind of keep your you can keep a lot of power in it if you do that, but you'll lose a lot if you overextend there. So you want to usually a little bit of hip, all the hip. There's all sorts of different timings you can do with it, and I encourage you to play with them, but your main focus should also be on the footwork and the pattern, and then sort of adapting to however you want to do it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below or reach out to me. And thank you very much. I hope you have a great day.